Hemshech Ayin Beis, the end of Maimer 37. Zeis Chukas, it's the end of chapter 148. And the Maimer page 289. 289. So, what we've learned in this Maimer was a long discussion on the Kudah sphere and Partzuf. And every level there's a Partzuf, there's all the four levels. So Atzilus has in it all four worlds. Another way of putting it is Daimon Samei Chaim Medaber, which correspond to the four worlds. And each level has all the other levels within it. All that comes to explaining the difference between the transmission of Atzilus for the purpose of Atzilus, transmission of Atzilus for the purpose of the lower worlds. So in Atzilus itself, you have the Medaber Sheba Medaber, that's like Chochmah, the Seichel itself, intelligence itself. And then you have the other three levels which are distinguished from that, that's already moving outward. So though Chai is far higher than Tzameach and Daimon, which are closer to each other, but they're all already Dover Nivdal. Mina Etzem, as he puts it. Now the question, of course, is how does this add to the whole discussion we've learned till now? Why do we need this introduction? And especially, I noticed that this Maimer and the following one, Chukas and Bolok, the next one, are both Mamorim that the Rebbe Rashab wrote on the second Madura. He didn't write it when he wrote the original Hamshach. So when he wrote the beginnings and ends, and that's when he added these two Maimorim completely. So if you actually skip these two Maimorim, you actually can read straight from the Maimer on Kairach and continue to the Maimer of Pinchas. And these two Maimorim essentially were put in afterwards. So it only adds to the question, what does it come to really add? So I believe what comes to add is a few points, key points. Firstly, as I think I mentioned already in a previous class, it gives us a more defined picture of Atzilus as the interface. Remember, Atzilus is the ultimate interface that he talks about, how Atzilus, without the world of Atzilus, we wouldn't have comprehension and feelings for the divine. We basically would not have a transcendental experience. So, not transcendental as in the Makif, as in the Sev and Bligvul, but Atzilus brings into the picture not just the structure of existence, but that which is beyond the structure. And that's the whole point of the spheres in Atzilus, that they are rooted all the way in the 10 hidden spheres. So they give us, in the structure of existence, can be traced all the way back to before the Tzimtzum. And Atzilus is where it manifests. And from there it transmits and channels it into the lower worlds all the way to our world. So in this Maimer and the next one that we're going to learn, he's analyzing how in Atzilus itself, more details. That in Atzilus itself, as we said, there's the Kudah sphere of Partzuf. There's the nucleus, there's the extension, the sphere with all the 10 spheres within it, and then there's the Datzcham, the four levels of Abiyah, of Atzilus B'ri Yitzir in each level. So number one is, it explains Atzilus in a more graphic and detailed way. Number two, it also gives us a better understanding of something he didn't address at least so explicitly earlier, and that is how Atzilus relates to something beyond Atzilus. Which really brings me back to the last chapter we just learned. You recall, when he brings it all back, he says, the main thing of Atzilus is, and this is a key lines, is that where he says, after he says Asis, how does he say it? One second. Well, in the beginning of the chapter, he said, as we discussed at length, that in Atzilus itself, he established that because the levels below have 4 dimensions of intelligence, in human intelligence, you have to say in Atzilus itself there's 4 dimensions. And each dimension corresponds, like he said, So clearly he spoke about how Atzilus is the root for all intelligence down below. So when he concludes this, and he says, what does he say in the top of page 289? He says, in other words, in Atzilus, what really dominates is Eir. It has Kalim. That's what he said, like Asius. It has Eish Kalim. But Atzilus is essentially a very clear, transparent picture. When you read words on a page, or you hear words from someone spoken, that's the world of Atzilus. Because there you have an expression, but there's no leap. When it comes to Cyrus, as he said, there's a very strong tzimtzum. There's a very strong concentration where the Cyrus, the hair, does not really have a revealed intelligence. It's a minimal amount. So that was an example for what for Tzemeach. For Chai, he said, the example would be, for Daimim, the example would be like the written word, which can't really express the deepest parts. Dibur, as I said, my Dibur is more Tzemeach. That's what it looks like. Because when he says at the end, he's talking about Ksav, which is like Daimim, letters, actual defined letters, the Chaimer Asius. And Sameach would be Dibur, which is more connected if you concentrate to the Primis HaKavona. Like Yisrael Zuta. Chai would be, it doesn't say specifically, but it's more like Machshava. Where he says the level would be the Malachim, the Srafim.
Where do you see Daimon?
Third line, top of 289. So, but bottom line is that Atzilus, however, the flow is as seamless as possible. Which means, because Atzilus is the fundamental interface. Atzilus is Gilei Helam, revealing the hidden. It's not Yesh Ma'ayin, it's not a separate entity. It's a completely divine structure. So Atzilus essentially is the ultimate of Medaber. And therefore, Atzilus, all the Atzilus, everything dominates. There's Atzilus of every level, which is what? That it's only Ha'ara, a reflection of the source. It's a reflection. It's not the source. Like he said before by the Asius. If you look at the Asius, he said there's the Asius, but they're actually part of the voice. And he says the Asius am keim le'era seichel, Asius am achshava and keim le'era seichel. Shad iyav shalish is pashtus is galas seichel b'lei machshava. Had yesh oras seichel be'asius machshava. It's only a reflection, but it's a reflection of the etzem, like the reflection of the sun. And that's, he says, B'zeu sham shachim b'chinas atzilus shebe'elyon b'chinas medaber d'atzilus hu b'chinas eir hadovuk u'miyuchad b'mkeireh. That's the line I was looking for. So in Atzilus, the dominant element is that it is eir hadovuk u'miyuchad b'mkeireh. Where do you see that most? You see that in pure intelligence, what we would call medaber shebe'medaber. As soon as intelligence is being applied, as soon as it's being drawn down, first into Chai. So Chai, I would say, maybe that's Machshava. It sounds like Machshava Dibra Mais is Chai, Tzemeach, and Daimim. It doesn't say it explicitly, but you read it again and again, it sounds like that. So Machshava would be still something connected. So it's still closer to Atzilus. It's like Bria. Remember, we learned in Bria also, higher levels of Bria. Malchus of Bria pierces. Remember, he said in Malchus you also have the 4 levels. Then you have Tzemeach, I would say is Dibur, based on what he's describing here. We have more of a revelation, but it's still now, it's already speaking. It's already going outward. It's no longer to yourself. And Daimon would be like the written word. The written word, which, like he says, Tavna delibule kasri inshu. So you see, then he says that. Anyway, but to get back to what we're saying here, so Atzilus is essentially, Atzilus of Atzilus Rebellion is the Medaber Atzilus, it's Eir HaDovuk. So another way of manifesting that's in the highest form of intelligence. What would be an example in our human intelligence? So he said, if you recall, not the intelligence in technique, which is Daimon, not the intelligence in innovation, in what you're going to craft or build. Not the intelligence in craft, in joining words together, which is the tziruf of Betzalel, which is Bina or Bria. but intelligence itself, and he called it Befrat and Elikus, because it's detached from any object. It's seichel for its own purpose, without being defined or limited by trying to understand something. Like he said, it's lifnei hateva, not in teva. Chochmas hateva, he called science. He called that was semeach, because it's in existence. So what is that in different words? That's another way of explaining what Atzilus is. So we have here another so-called manifestation of Atzilus and how it expresses itself in our lives down below. And when Atzilus is emanating for the purpose of Atzilus, that's what dominates, that element. Basically, it's like so-called detached intelligence, if you want to call it, detached from existence. And then as it moves downward, for Biyah, that's already Chachai Tzemet Tzemeir Demim, that's already, like he said at the end of the chapter, Aval Mashanim Shema Atzilus Gufa B'chinis Yishtalshus Min Chachma Bina L'Zoh Mizol L'Malchus L'Seder Biyah is Erak B'chinis Datzach Shabelya. So Atzilus has its own structure. It has from Chachma to Malchus. But if you're talking only for the purpose of Atzilus, within the world of Atzilus, its purpose is primarily the Seichel. But there's an element in Atzilus that's preparing the ground for the next level, in the Tzerech Biyah, and that already now, what's dominant in Atzilus itself then is Demim Tzemeach Chai, or Chai Tzemeach Demim, so to speak, which really would be, Chai would be Bina, Zoh would be, Midas would be Tzemeach, and Malchus would be Daimon. Or the 4 levels in Malchus itself. Or the 4 levels in Chesed itself, like he spoke as well. So basically you have a rounded picture and explaining how in Atzilus itself you have these 4 dimensions. And when you really read it a few times, you start getting the picture that everything we learned earlier now is coming far more defined than it was defined earlier. So now let's conclude the Maimer.
1 second. So when we started the Maimer, we said about Nakuda Sphere Partzuf, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Nakuda is more for Atzilus itself, and the Partzuf is what?
No, not at all.
In Partzuf itself is for Atzilus.
In Partzuf itself, there's 4 levels, so it depends which focus. In Atzilus, what dominates is the Atzilus of Atzilus, which is the Medaber part. It has them Tzemeach Chai.
So the difference, like he started...
No, there's 2 things. For Atzilus, Dem Tzemeach Chai are on the level commensurate to the Atzilus. In other words, Atzilus itself, in pure intelligence itself, you also have the lower levels. He didn't really explain what that is. You know, it's in pure Seichel itself, you also have the Chai in it, the Tzemeach, and the Daimim in it. I mean, he did explain it in Malchus, actually. He did explain it in Malchus, and in Chesed as well, to some extent, not all of them. Spoke mostly the higher levels.
So, but in this Maimer, did he already emphasize?
Go in order from the beginning of the Maimer. He began. He says, and to understand that, he said, we have to understand between Asius and Cyrus.
Right.
And to understand that, we have to understand the Kudas Frida Partzuf. So you have to work your way backwards now. The Kudas Frida Partzuf coming to explain the difference between Asius and Cyrus. Because as he said, Asius is like Atzilus itself. That would be Medaber. Way speaking, maybe Chai also. And Cyrus is definitely Tzemeach, and an element of Medemim also. Actually, Cyrus is a good example. It's Tzemeach. Remember, Tzemeach also has a similarity to Demim. So Cyrus, on one hand, has very little life in it. That's why when you cut it, doesn't hurt. So it's like a Demim in that sense. It's inanimate. But it has a little Chayas in it. So it's actually very fitting. Remember, he said Tzemeach is fundamentally Demim, just with a little revealed energy. So that comes to explain Asis and Cyrus, which in turn, the end of the chapter comes to explain now Atzilus as opposed to the Atzilus for Atzilus as opposed to for the purpose of Biyah. So essentially, basically, as I said, the simple example is like this. Atzilus is the master teacher, who's the interface between that which is beyond the structure, beyond Atzilus, Lakus, so-called, and that which is below, which is separate from and doesn't yet have full divine consciousness, not fully aligned. So Atzilus is like the bridge, the perfect interface between the 2 worlds. So it's like a teacher in a sense that teaching the lower levels what the higher levels have to say. Like we said, Sipur, Misper, Sipur, Sapir, Sefer, telling a story. The Sfiras are. And that story is the story of what God wants and God's mind and God's heart, so to speak, through Atzilus. Now, in Atzilus there's a whole dimension, there's a whole reality. There are neshamas that come from Atzilus. Look, he said Chachma Shleima comes from Atzilus. His wisdom came from that place, which allowed him to be able to have that type of ability to build the Beis HaMikdash, etc. Betzalel is a lower level, the next level, as he explained. So now, when you think of the teacher here, like Shlomo Melech would say, the master teacher, Shlomo here, like Atzilus, so this is how he would teach people on his own level. What people of the neshamas of Atzilus, how do they communicate with each other? So they communicate with each other primarily on a medaber level. No, I wouldn't use that at all. He didn't say such a thing. No, why is it? No. Medaber, seichel, that's pure intelligence that doesn't need yet to be applied or brought down to a next level. It's in its purest form. But then how this teacher relates to the next worlds, because he also has to transmit to the next, then he has to look inside himself, and he can't just reveal the medaber of the medaber. He has to reveal the chai, tzemeach, and daimim within the medaber, which in turn will create a world of chai and bria, and tzemeach in yitzira, and daimim in asiyah. Now each of those worlds also have all four. But each one, the dominant one is in bria, the dominant is chai. But it also has a medaber within chai, and it has a tzemeach and daimim. Didn't spell them all out, but he spelled many of them out. So essentially, in Atzilus itself, meichin be'etzem, we spoke about seichel be'etzem, right? Not seichel hachemer, haskolos hachemer. Seichel be'etzem is chachma. Remember, Yichud Abba ve'ima Eloin, what Matan Torah will contribute. Then you have Yisrael Saba v'zuta, Yisrael Saba and v'tfuna rather. That's already how Meichin is starting to be applied to Midas, or being applied to the student. Remember the Nehi, how to teach to the student. He's already reaching downward. Then there's Midas itself, the application which are informed by intelligence. And then there's the application which only has a minimal, the halacha, like just the conclusion, that has a minimal amount of intelligence. So you have in Atzilus, those are 4 levels in Atzilus we learned.
Betzalel is also Tfuna, no?
Yeah, the Pashtas Tfuna. Yeah. He doesn't say that specifically, he says Bina. It's clearly Bina of Atzilus or Bria. Say Chachma de Bria. So bottom line is, you have all these levels, that's really ties it together. So now he's going to go back and answer the questions at the beginning of the Maimer. Any questions? Okay.
Yeah, how does this tie in with the Parzuf? I know you mentioned it before.
Parzuf is Abya, clearly. The 4 levels of Dem Tzemei Chaim Medaber is Abya. The Kud and Sfira are just to explain what Parzuf is. He starts with that. That starts with the nucleus. Mm-hmm. In other words, to understand, I remember I said, and dissect Atzilus a Sfira, how does a Sfira evolve? So it starts with a seed, a nucleus. Like he said, that was the capacity. Person knows that he could resolve an issue. A person has the power to do chesed. Not kayach hamaskil. That's
no way related to medaber.
No, I would say no. It doesn't yet have. It's just a spark. It's just a seed. The seed then has 10 spheres in it. Now you have a sphere. When it becomes a parzuf, that's when it starts developing 4 dimensions. Obviously, the 4 are also in the nekuda, but he doesn't talk about that. It's not what's relevant here.
So every sphere has. Just one other question. Every sphere has that tzacham.
Yeah, the end. Yeah, clearly he said it the Fedish. That's mamish the first chapter in the Maimer. He said clearly every sphere. He said right here, parzuf. Let's see the actual issues. V'zein abiyasha b'chol sphere shemadregas nevdolis. In the middle of the page. See the line starts Heimer Rechoikim Zemazeh.
Wait, which page?
Reish Pei Beis, 282. Yeah. Then he spoke. In Chachmi Yeshlemer Zal Derech Moshe Kumen Yonim HaMistayfim Min HaSeichel. In other words, in Chachma, what do you have Dem Tzemei Chaim Medaber in Chachma? Or he didn't say Dem Tzemei Chaim Medaber, rather. He's still speaking Abiyah. So he says that's the derivatives. Remember we spoke about the derivative ideas that come out of the original intelligence. And he said Abiyah in Dal Madregas Datzcham. That's when he started the whole thing.
So every sphere has a biyah, and every sphere has
Datzcham, because Datzcham is Abiyah. Look a few lines right there. You have to go over it again after the Maimer to get it.
Abiyah in Dal makes sense.
Yeah. Any of you go over the Maimar from the beginning, or you rely on me? Okay, Tzadik b'Manaseh.
We rely on the Tzilis. So it is. But why did you say that?
Okay.
When I mentioned, I'm sorry to. When I meant Nikudes, that it's like we say that Moshe Rabbeinu kibul kol atera kol Moshe Talmid Vosi. And the Chassidus explains, as far as I know, that it doesn't mean necessarily in every prat was defined at that point. He got it as a nekuda.
Because that has nothing to do with this Maimon.
And I thought somehow it is, when you say that Neshama de Atzilus, he was speaking about interaction between Neshama de Atzilus.
I was giving an example, right?
No, somehow by me it's.
Crosswire.
I don't necessarily see it that way.
So this Moshe Rabbeinu redt von anderen Moshe Rabbeinu ist das sagen ein Wort wie meint das sei.
Yeah, but it's nothing to do with this Hemshech.
So isn't it then?
It's a nice idea, but it's nothing to do with this Maimer. That's what I'm saying to you. It's like the Rebbe once wrote to us. He says we wrote something. Mm-hmm. No. I'm sorry. Someone wrote to the Rebbe a whole critique about something he said. Mm-hmm. So the Rebbe wrote, it's a very good critique, but it's sent to the wrong address. What you're saying is very good, but it has nothing to do with this Maimer. At least if you can explain to me where you fit it in, because
this whole thing of Nekuda, Sphira.
No, not at all. Nekuda is a nucleus, it's a seed. It has nothing to do with what you're talking about. You're talking about that he was able to, the klal and the prat. I would not say that's what's connected here. I don't know where you're even connecting it from. You're bringing in your own ideas, basically, which is fine, but it's nothing to do with this Maimer. Trust me, it's nothing to do with that. If you can show me how to do the Maimer, I'd be happy to understand. This is like you're taking two things and connecting. Fine, it's all right, but it's nothing to do with the Maimer. The Nekuda Sfira Partziv has nothing to do with this. The Nekuda Sfira Partziv is like the seed of a child that's been conceived. Sfira is development, and Partziv is a full-bodied structure. What does it have to do with how Moshe speaks to other neshamas of Atzilus? I was speaking Atzilus has what he said. That what he did say is that there's Atzilus l'tzerech Atzilus and there's Atzilus l'tzerech Biyah. That's what I explained. That's like Asius. As a matter of fact, here it's Atzilus with B words, explaining something without too much tzimtzum.
I'm asking the right address. Does this go ad infinitum? In other words,
look, you know what? I just want to say something. When I do this again and again for one reason. Seichel includes two things. One is to understand and also know what not to mix in. You start mixing everything into something, you just get one big confused mess.
Does this go in?
There's chesed and gvura in Seichel too, in other words.
But you have all the spheres within each sphere. So there's that go infinitum, those spheres that are and then it further divides, keeps going down into infinitely small, like or big, whatever you want to say, down like microscopic particles going down. You want to allude to
not relevant here.
That's the wrong address.
No, wrong place. Not I don't see the relevance here. The focus is very clear. The focus of what he wants to say. He says clearly. He even gave us the coordinates. He said, "I'm going to explain all this that we learned with understanding l'tzerech Atzilus, l'tzerech Biyah. To understand that, I want to explain Asis and Sidus. To explain that, I want to explain the Nekuda Sfira Partziv. You have right there four things that's the issue at hand. I have no problem. You can bring anything from anywhere. Just fit it in to something. Either it explains something or it's a contradiction. There's no problem with that. You're allowed to bring another Maimon and say you learn another Maimon, it says differently. I have no problem. But just to bring your connection to something, that always creates more confusion, because then we have to contend with what you're thinking, not what the Rebbe Rashab is necessarily saying.
It's actually built up on what you said about the spiritual world, this world will go into infinity downwards or infinity upwards.
But I said it right now in this chapter?
No.
So you mean a different Maimorim? I was speaking about it.
Somewhere.
So Partziv is made up of...
Ayin Beis includes all the Chassidus, my friend. So everything is going to be everything. Everyone understands clearly this Maimer now?
The Partziv is made up of Osiris and Cyrus.
I'm sorry?
After we finish this Maimer, we could say that Partziv is made up of Osiris and Cyrus.
No. Parts is made up of Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah.
I know.
Daimim, Tzemeach, Chaim, Medaber.
Not made up of Oisius and Cyrus, but basically one Gila we would call Ois. That's
Which
where
one?
The one.
Aish is mostly Medaber, and Cyrus sounds like Tzemeach and somewhat Daimim.
So the way
I would say Aishis have two dimensions, Medaber and the Chai. That's what I would say. And Cyrus is like Tzemeach and Daimim, to be more precise.
the Hamshachal, the Tzarech Atma of Atzilus is basically is Oisius, which is the higher two parts of
The highest,
the highest part of,
primarily the highest,
and then the Tzarech Biyah
is the three lower ones.
and
Daimim, Chai,
that would be called Cyrus.
No, not necessarily. Cyrus is not Chai. Cyrus is Tzemeach.
Okay, but Tzemech and Biyah.
Yeah, Tzemeach and Daimim.
Tzemech and Doim.
Yeah. Yeah, in other words, yes, you could say that L'Tzerech Biyah, it's more of a transmission like through Cyrus, and L'Tzerech Atzilus, it's more of a transmission through Aishis. That would be accurate. Except the exact breakdown is a little more subtle.
Maybe the high component of the Cyrus is the beard, and the dim component of the Cyrus is the hair on top of the head.
I wouldn't go there, because here clearly says Cyrus is Tzemeach, not higher than that. And there would be a problem if Cyrus comes higher, because Chai is a strong revelation. Chai looks to me like Chai is Machshava. I would say that Atzilus is Seichel, and Bri Yitzir Asiyah is Chai Tzemeach Daimim, would be Machshava Dibur Ma'aser. That's what it sounds like here. I can't say it's exactly like that, but it sounds something very similar. Like Bina, like
It's almost the same thing like Samech, because when you cut a flower or when it doesn't feel any pain, just like
exactly, because there's very little.
Right, it's
Yeah,
just like a Samech.
exactly correct. Cyrus are Tzemeach Sheba
How
Adam.
do you know a flower doesn't feel pain?
It's the exact same thing like when you cut your hair, it doesn't feel any pain.
How do you know that?
It's the exact same thing. When you rip it out of the ground, yes, just like you're ripping hair out of your head, it will feel pain.
According to the above, we'll understand. Masha Amar Shlema Amarti Chakma V'hidachekam. So we learned in the beginning of the Maimer, if you recall, a bunch of questions. Shlema said, "I'm Paraduma, a Chakma. I tried. Chakma is usually future. I tried, but it looks like it sounds back at the past. I tried to understand, but it's distant from me, right?" Chakma means I will try usually, no? In Hebrew.
How would you say it in past tense? Since the Mustama is interchangeable.
Right. Just going back. Nasisi, calls it Nasisi b'chachma mati, chakma b'hidach. Okay. Chakma b'hidach hekem, fine. You could also say, I will try, okay, but anyway. Hidach hekem emeni. Hidach hekem. Tihina masha amar, deya kanisa, machasarta. I think it was good to go back to see exactly what he said. Because remember, there was a whole bunch of questions. It was very obvious from the questions the connection to the Maimer, if I recall as well. Let me just read quickly the beginning. Medrash Rabbi Isam. So we start with Zeis Chukas. What's called Arichas Zeis Chukas and Dvar Daber al Bnei Yisrael? Ma Arichas Zeis Chukas. Medrash Rabbi said what? Kol Zeh Nesisi b'Chachmei Rabbi Yitzchak Pasach. Ksiv Vayitna Lekim Chachmei L'Shlema V'Tfuna Harba Me'ed Kechel Ashel Srasayam. Ma'u Kechel. Why is it compared to sand? Kashem Shachel Gedel Yam Kachos Chachmei Gedel L'Shlema. So just like sand, boundaries, so-called creates the boundary around the sea, Chachma was a boundary around Shlomo, which means he didn't understand everything. There was a boundary involved. Then he continued, Matla Amrin, Das Chasarta Makanisa. This is was gesagt, yeah.
Das Konisa.
Huh?
Das Konisa Machosarta.
Das Chasarta Makanisa steht.
So there is.
Really? Really?
No, the first one, there's two of them. There's Chasarta and Makanis.
Yeah, then Das Kanisa Machasarta. Umayrik bin Chachma Shleim Mesayim Omer Umesayim Omer Shleim Al Kol Ela Mati Upasha Poradum Chakarti V'Shaltu V'Paradu V'Hilchekmen V'Zel Kol Zeh Nesisi B'Chachma Mati Chachma Pasha Poradum V'Hilchekmen. Okay, so we were struggling with that also. We didn't look inside the message, did we? No. Basically, Matlam, that's what they say. Das Chasarta Makanisa. Das Kanisa Machasarta. Which basically means that something is missing. She says, "Tzarich lav ma'yin para aduma shegam shleim b'chachmos le'amad aleh. The chol yanam amad aleh para aduma amarte chachmos v'gam ma'u amarte chachmos d'machas shirecheke shalman masog eich rotzel is chacham ba." Okay, those are the questions.
What did he attempt?
Gam tzarich lav ma'yin das kanisa machasad the koy al shleim avalei makom mokim hayachos b'sog parsha aduma. Das kanisa machasad means you've acquired das. So what are you missing?
Nothing.
Yeah. Then,
He was missing paraduma.
yeah.
That's the question.
So he says the koyach shlem v'hari hali makom echasus. So what's min das kanis machasat? We're saying befedish that he was missing. That's the gedel l'shlema that he's missing it. But what's das chasat makanisa mean? The first half.
If you don't have that, then
Yeah, then what do you
If you don't have das, what did you acquire? Once you have das, what are you missing? Ah, very nice. Okay, so it's like the same statement basically. But the first half makes sense because he's having das chasarta because he is lacking das. So he's missing something. But the second half, das kanisa, since he had das, so clearly we have to understand that also. Okay, that's the questions. Let's go back here. I just wanted to get it back to clarify. Now you've das kanisa. There's much called deya kanisa now, he says.
The whole time it's there.
There too?
Yeah. You were just reading it down, but it's there.
You're right. Sorry.
It's fine.
No, I don't see a hey no sof
It's
so
the
well.
same idea.
No, but I'm sagen richtig. Deya kanisa. Sorry. Correct me because deya kanisa. Time for reading glasses, my friends. I can say a hey and a sof looks to me like the same.
What does it mean different than das?
No, nothing. Deya, same thing.
No.
Yeah. So now he says like this: Mashakosov deya kasnisa machasat koyal b'chinas seichel datzilis b'chinas medaber. That's talking about seichel of atzilis, the level of medaber. Dezel milas hamedaber b'chinas seichel v'das. That's one of the power of a medaber. Like he said, medaber is primarily what's a medaber? It's intelligence, knowledge, intelligence and knowledge. Valzei medas kanisa machasat deya kanisa mach. Oh, here now it says das. By me, a sof is a hey and a hey is a sof. Now here I see sof. Das kan is a machasart. Okay, no, shem b'shem. So I was machav. Why he says once das and one day I don't really know.
You read better without your glasses.
I could, but then I have to get to it. It's all right. Why do I sound incoherent?
But Pashas, it shouldn't.
One can hear it to me.
But Pashas not bekavana. It should be a hay over here.
Yeah, okay.
They might take
Okay, valzeimer das kan is a machasart. Shei dezen nishlam kol chsad. So what are we talking here? We're talking about das of Atzilus. That through this nishlam kol chsad, because Atzilus is a complete world. So when you have seichel of Atzilus and medaber, there's nothing missing. Nishlam kol chsad. You remember chsad is now bringing us back to chsad. Gedenk chsad. No.
Yeah, it keeps up the same.
Remember that whole chapter on chsad.
Over and over again.
Chsad halavona. Yeah. So that brings us now back.
Using a word the whole time.
Yeah, because he was explaining. So now,
Kuf Mem Gimel.
Kuf Mem Gimel?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's going back to that now. So Kuf Mem Gimel is the whole thing chsad. If you remember, the whole world is based on chsad. Atzilus fulfills the chsad. That's what the Avis did. Right? They filled in the gap. They filled in the lack. That's what we define, lack. Shaddai. Kovaelamis was the whole thing about,
That whole mind.
Mili Hachsan. Yeah, right. Good. So, the Masha Malchus, he b'chinas chsad neir, zeu ba'am shocha shel etzel biyah. He's really tying it together now. Because when you say Malchus is lacking air, like we say the Levona is diminished, that's in the transmission for Tzedek B'Yah, because there's no way that Malchus, Sham Shochi Ha'ara B'Avdalis, Valkein B'chinas Malchus, B'chinas Heder. Because for Malchus to transmit into B'Yah, as we learned many times in this Hemshech, right? It has to be diminished. It cannot radiate with the whole intensity of Atzilus and expect that B'Yah should remain standing. We just learned the last chapter, right? The Malachim, the 8 Yetzim Mishasov do not get the bottle from the Gili. Not like the Srafim. They remain standing. even though they sense awe, but they remain standing. So for Malchus, so this is not Malchus of Tzedek Biyah. So Malchus of Atzilus, for it to transmit into Biyah, it has to have Hara Nivdelis. There has to be a break. There has to be a type of severing, or like a separate type of reflection, certain leap, certain jump. Detached, right? Detached. That's why in Malchus there's a state of Hedre, lack of light. But Namshach and Atzilus, Machasarta. Lo yesh b'chinas chod kam b'chinas Malchus. So Malchus stands in Atzilus in the same level of Atzilus, not as it's transmitting to the next level. There, it's in a state of completion. There's no chesed. She's teaching that's das kanisa machasarta. That das kanisa, meaning Atzilus, where you acquire das, where there's seichel medaber. So even the daemon there, which means Malchus, is also in a level of machasarta. That's the taich. Okay, Shtim's good. But now the inyan in this is in Yadua. Now it's known the Heis Vidus Adashen is the Malchus. Okay, now we're going back to the discussion by Kaimasid Bashla. Which chapter is that, my friends? No, not Kufman Gimel. Now we're going back far earlier. Yeah. Now we're going back to what I said before with Teferis. Remember Evan Hazes, that chapter.
Yeah. Here he's talking about the Chassid Heis missing the Hepatzufim, no?
No. We're talking chapter Kuf Yud Gimel now.
Kuf Yud Gimel?
113. Remember the Levana, the higher part of the Levana is always radiating.
Yeah.
And it's also connected there. It's Kuf Mem Gimel. It's not a stira. Yeah. I'm just referring to both. The Mitzvah that. So okay. So here goes. In Indian, the Yadua, the Heis Vidus Adashen, the Malchus and Tamid B'chinas Gili Er. I'm going to add something about that whole piece with the Levana. I did research on it. Remember the moon issues? Yeah. I have resolved. The big Nitzachim this week. The Mittler Rebbe helped out.
It's based on the Mittler Rebbe, you said.
Yeah, but the Mittler Rebbe, I found something that he actually answers all the questions we had. So he could tell us the Lush company, all the astronomers and astrologers in the Lubavitch.
So what is it?
I'll tell you in a moment. Let me read it and then you'll see it's relevant here. Yadua, the Heis Vidus Adashen is the Yadua he's saying now is literally said in chapter 113, and he brought it there from the Siddur on the Pasuk Yosis Kegibir, Loretz Erech. That's the Taich and Siddur on this whole thing. No. He says from the beard of the Mittler Rebbe, B'Siddur, here, calls it B'Siddur. No, I didn't mean the Siddur in Davening. The beard on the Pasuk Yosis and Siddur, that's what I meant. Yeah. So here's what it says. The Heis Vidus Adashen is the Malchus. Malchus itself has, as we learned, parts, right? Has all the spheres in it. So the higher first spheres, which means Chochmah through Teferes,
is always radiating.
Hem Tamid B'chinas Gili Er. They're always in a state of Gili. So Malchus is like first half of Malchus. Think of it, the Makabel as he's facing the Mashpia.
It's always full.
Yeah, we're going to speak about it in a minute. And when we talk about a lack of light or energy, that's in the lower part. It's interesting, he doesn't say him back to Kuf Yud Gimel. Mamish says it there. He's usually very cross-referencing. Okay. I think I know why, because he added this maimer later. I said even more so. Maybe he added that. Ukidu has known the mashal for this ma'alavana from the moon. The moon has a fullness and has a lack, waxes and wanes, as they say. The changes in the moon are only in the second half, in the lower half. That's where there are changes. That sometimes you have more, sometimes less. In other words, in the part of the sphere facing Earth.
Yeah.
We're going to go in a minute. When you have the birth of the moon, meaning the beginning, the glimmer, the first glimmer of the light is now entering the lower.
Right.
I'm sorry. Okay, maybe my mistake. Fine. The higher part of the sphere, meaning the one that's facing the sun, is always radiating. The lower half is the one that doesn't always illuminate or radiate. And then when there's the new moon, when the new birth, a little part now is also entering the lower dimension of the moon that's facing us, and it continues to grow and strengthen its light till the 15th of the month. Yeah, exactly. Hold on. I'm going to tell you in a second. 1 second. There radiates also, he says, the lower half. So the top half, meaning the facing the sun, doesn't change. It always has light. The second one goes through the gradations, all the waxing away and all the phases of the moon that we are familiar with, that we see, is only the part of the moon that's facing us, the Chetzik Hadra Tachten. Hold on. Let's read it till then I'll go back to this. Let me stop right now. The mile is not a problem. The sun is a mile. So we had a problem when we learned this back in chapter 6 Gimel. What's going on? How is it consistent with modern astronomy that says the moon is orbiting? It's not this. The moon is orbiting, and there's no way when the moon is. Yes, it's true. The moon always has a full moon when it's facing the sun. The question is the angle. So when the moon, the Earth is, let's say, here, and the moon is here, and the sun is here, an example. So then you only see part. But if the moon is, the angle is the proper angle, it's like a mirror. It's like a mirror. Like you look at a mirror, you can see a full reflection, or you can see partial reflection. So if you have a perfect angle, you have the sun here, the moon here, in other words, like that, and the Earth here. The Earth, in other words, and the sun are very close, so it's like seeing it like that. Whereas, for example, if the Earth is this and the moon is here, so then you only see partial. If the Earth is here, you see nothing. So it's based on an orbit, and this orbit is so the same part of the moon is always one half is always light and one half is dark. That's true. But you never have a situation where a half is always light and another half is not, and sometimes all of it is bright. It doesn't make sense. So there's two questions really here. One, it's not consistent with astronomy, with modern astronomy. And secondly, how does it work even? What's happening? It sounds almost like the light is penetrating the moon and like just burning through it. Also, the other half seems to be lit up. So the second question I don't have a full answer for, but we can talk about it too. But the first one, so I looked at Pirush HaMilos from the Mittler Rebbe, and I'm going to read to you exactly what he says. He says Mamish asked the question. Not Mamish the same words, but he says like this. I'm reading. I wrote it here. He says like this. He says, "Kol zeh lefi das ha'aymer de galgal chesed u'mazolas kfuyim." All this that we're discussing is the Gemara. There's a machlekes. Whether the moon stands in one place, whether the galgal, actually the sphere where the moon is, stands in one place, the sphere may be moving, but the moon itself, mazol is kfuyim, so the moon doesn't move. According to that, very clearly, there's one half of the moon that's always there, so you're not going to have, and the other half is always dark. So where do you have any type of the only way to explain it then is this explanation here.
You're talking about rotating or moving in orbit?
Both. Relevant to the reflection here. Then he continues there in Pirush HaMilos and says, but according to the Deya in the Gemara, that the mazolas are moving, then he says clearly you can't say the way they explained it here. Then Taka is because of the movement that changes, the angles that change. He says it specifically there. But the thing is, Teira, the Chazal took the first choice, not the second one. The second one is what astronomy says today. So the Gemara, there are two opinions. The Gemara brings both, and there would be a different explanation. So the explanation we're learning now is according to the opinion that the moon doesn't move, basically. It's kavua. The mazolas are kvuim.
So what does move? The Earth?
The galgal moves. The galgal means the entire sphere, but that doesn't change. The moon remains no matter what you're doing. The moon does not change. The moon is a steady position with the sun like this, and there's never any type of cycles in that sense.
So how does it get smaller and larger? Because we're moving?
No, that's the explanation here. That's a different explanation. That Ataka shines through or something. Something happened. That I don't.
It's very hard to phase that in with the explanation.
Oh, it says there. No. He says like this. It's a result of the moon and sun getting closer or more distant. That's what he says. When the sun, and there's two opinions in that too. When the moon gets closer to the sun, it becomes far brighter. So even the second half gets illuminated. It's like going through it. It's not consistent with modern science, to my knowledge. With that, we need already more people to explain. But at least they address this issue. This is according to the opinion that the mazolos are kfuyim. So when this moon gets so close to the sun, you could say it gets so full with it, so it starts also radiating more and more and more. And by Rosh Chodesh, by the full moon, it gets so close that the whole moon is bright. That's the way it's explained. There's another opinion that's the other way around. That the closer the moon gets to the sun, the darker it gets, because it's bottle. And the farther it gets from the sun, the lighter it gets.
That's actually the one that we say.
Yeah, but those are also both opinions in Mazel Kfua. Mazal is Kfuyim. You follow what I'm saying? So I'm not necessarily reconciling, and I'm just trying to tell you that this is at least...
Doesn't mean, when you said the galgal is moving, it means that everything is moving, even the moon also. It's just kavu or whatever in the galgal, but if the galgal is moving, so everything is. So why not to explain it the astronomical way? Still has to do with the angles.
Because the galgal only affects day and night; it doesn't affect the cycles of the moon. Because the moon, no matter what position, it's always facing the sun.
So it means the moon.
You have to go ahead and study the thing with the galgalim. I can't tell you, but he makes it very clear that this is according to the
day and night is only the rotation of the Earth.
The 24.
Yeah. And it becomes very confusing when you think of the non-Copernicus way of saying that the Earth is the center of all rotation.
Okay.
Physics.
And all I wanted to say is that I discovered that least Tibavonim, he says, is according to that day. And that's it. That's the day he's talking about. You want to understand that day, go to the Gemara. But there is such an opinion. That's the point. And yes, then it's not like we understand it usually about cycle, angles and so on. But he says clearly that according to the other opinion, that the mazel is turning, the mazel is moving, then the explanation is not, this explanation is not accurate. It's a different. Then the explanation Taki goes based on phases, based on angles.
We should invite Los, yeah.
Huh?
We should invite Los.
He told me he doesn't understand the whole thing, but
yeah. Er is ook nog versteekt niet?
No.
The father Rosh you're talking about, the Gabbai Rosh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But he was talking about,
Was meant gewoon,
No. I don't know. You could ask him. I don't know.
Okay. Right. Hey, spheres.
Okay, so the Levana is an example of Malchus. The first higher 5 spheres are always radiating. The lower ones go through the changes, phases. Malchus, the Malchus, the high, same thing, Malchus, which is the Levana. The first 5 spheres, the Malchus, that's how Malchus is not Atzilus. In other words, basically facing the sun. It always has revelation, light, revealed light. That's how Malchus is the level of Medaber, because it's facing the sun, the higher levels of Malchus. And any diminishing or lack of light is in the 5 lower spheres. The way Malchus becomes a source for Biyah. Malchus is already connecting to earth. So Biyah here would be Eretz, Shemesh would be Atzilus, the highest, and Malchus faces the 5 higher spheres is how it relates to Atzilus, so that's radiates, and the 5 lower ones goes through the changes.
According to this, I think Tiferes would be part of the 5 lower one, right?
No, the higher.
Why would it be the lower ones?
Because Chabad and then Chesed and Gvura, the first 5.
You don't count Das.
Items. Okay, don't count. Okay.
Well, let me see. There's the 5 higher spheres and there's the 5 lower spheres. Depends. Malchus, Sheba Malchus. Is he counting? Malchus. Maybe Tiferes does belong in the lower. I'm not sure.
He
He doesn't say. He doesn't spell it out. Now, B'yemei Shleima, in the word time of days of Shleima, Kaim Esida B'Shlemusa. This he also says back in Kuf Yud Gimel. Days of Shleima, the moon was full. The revelation was also in the 5 lower spheres. V'hainu kanal, and that's like we spoke about above. The Shleima hayu neshama d'Atzilus, because Shleima was a neshama of Atzilus, not like Betzalel. Neshama soul of Atzilus. Himshach chesaer k'maishu b'madregas Atzilus. He transmitted, drew down the energy the way it's on the level of Atzilus. V'alkein hayagili b'chlolos b'chinas hamalchus gam be'hes v'des achrenes. And that's why the revelation in general in Malchus was also in the 5 lower spheres. So because Shleima is that level, so the moon is a full moon. That's the level he was at. V'zeu das kanisa, b'chinas das d'Atzilus machasart. And that's what it means in the Medrash that brings this pasuk. Das kanisa. You've acquired das, which is das? Das d'Atzilus. Maybe that's why he's saying das, not deya. Because saying das d'Atzilus, so it's, Machasart shlo yeshum chsad n'klal. What are you lacking? Because there's no lack of it at all. Okay, so now we know what Shleim is. Now comes another level. Nevertheless, Parshas Paraduma, this he did not acquire. He was not able to reach. He was not able to own. Because now in Ageres HaKedesh in Tanya chapter Ageres HaKedesh, that is 4th section, section 28, Kosav, he writes, the Inyan Kiddush Yimechatasu B'chinas Kadesh Elyon Anikra Talad de Blucha. Kiddush Mechatas, which means when you sprinkle, you sanctify the waters of the Paraduma, Chatas. So it's called Kiddush Mechatas because you're purifying the person, so it's called Kedusha. So he says that's the level of Kadesh Elyon. Anikra Talad de Blucha. Talad de Blucha means the dew of
crystallization
of the crystal, like a crystallic dew, dew that's like a crystal clear dew.
like formation.
It's considered to be a very high level, but Dulucha is also sometimes used. We used it before when we talk about Evan Sapir.
It's about transparent, the colorless.
Yeah, so it's like a crystal. Looks like crystal. Right. B'Sham, and there in the Gezer case, B'Shem HaZeir, he brings the name of Zeir, the Zeir. She begins Chachmei La u'Meichus Tema. That this is the level of Chachmei La, which is Chachmei of Atzilus, and Meichus Tema, the hidden in wisdom, hidden intelligence. The Meichus Tema begins Chachmei Shebekesser, because Meichus Tema is the wisdom of Kesser, as we've spoken about. Chachmei Shebekesser. Chachmei La is begins Chachmei Atzilus. Chachmei La is like the reveal. This Chachmei Gluya, Chachmei Stima. So Chachmei Atzilus. V'hainu b'chinas atzmus ha-Chachmei mamish. So the fact that he calls it Chachmei La and Meichus Tima, clearly we're talking about atzmus ha-Chachmei mamish, the core of wisdom itself. Lo b'chinas ha'ara levad, not just a reflection. So remember so now we're talking atzmus ha-Meichim. V'halkein lo yomet shleim al zeh. And that's why Shleim was not able to, literally, Allah Yamad means to stand, but Allah Yamad means he was not able to contain it, not able to reach it, not able to acquire this wisdom. Why? The Ima Yeshe B'chinas Atzilus, because even though he was the level of Atzilus, how he calls it Ha'ara Levad. Atzilus itself, as we discussed, is Ha'ara. It's like the letters. It's a reflection of the Etzem, it's not the Etzem. So he's now finding that in Medaber itself there's even a higher level. That's I thought that was Medaber.
That's my Chustuma.
So let's see here. but the core Chachma is higher upon higher. And this he was not able to reach with his wisdom. So now we have another level now. So essentially Chachma, Atzma Chachma, that connects to Chachma Keser. I'm wondering, see, till now I was thinking that Medaber is Abba Ve'imei Lion, and Chai was Sol Sabbat Tfuna. Probably still that way. He's now revealing a fifth level. Etzem HaMechen. Maybe even higher than Atzmus of Chachma. I'm not sure yet. Let's see. I don't know if you're wondering what I'm wondering, but because Shleima sounded very much like Matan Torah in a way. Not the others, not the Shol Sabbat. Okay, let's see. Let me see here. He may qualify. Yeah, but that is all in Etzem HaChachma. That's Etzem HaChachma. But that's like Medaber B'Cher. Okay. So remember the question he asked, if that's the case, if it's beyond, why did he even try? Remember that was one of the questions, right? In the beginning of the chapter. What did he say? He said, so he's answering that, because it's not completely apart. It's still Chachma, it's still a reflection. That's why I said I will try to understand, because it's still a reflection. Chachma is an ability to reach there. So an attempt is made, which means he has something reaching toward there. But to actually contain it, to actually own it, that not. And now it goes back to the question. He asked the question, what's he said, Das Deya Kanisa Machasarta. What do you mean Machasarta? He doesn't have Paraduma. So he's Yechasar. So he's saying it's not a stira to what it says Machasarta, because we just said nothing is missing in Atzilus. The Ma'achas Shezehu Mashamuvdul Be'erech Mishtalshlus. Being that this Chachmas Tema, Paraduma, is relatively detached from the order, the structure. Ein Zechson B'Seder Shtalshlus. So it's not a lack in the Seder Shtalshlus. It's a lack of what he doesn't have beyond the Shtalshlus. But in the Shtalshlus, there's nothing missing. So what would be missing? Missing would mean in the Shtalshlus itself, you're in the structure, in Chachma all the way to Malchus, and there's lacking a lack of energy, a light. That's a Chson v'Gileir. How does a mili Chson? So Shleim is the level, or Deya Kanisa is the level of Miliyach Chson. It fills in the lack. It fills the void. But that which is detached or separate from the whole structure in the first place, lacking it is not a weakness in the Shtalshlus. It's a beautiful answer. So Shleim in his world was missing nothing. Deya. But if you want to know what's something beyond this world, that maybe that's also the word Recheka.
Recheka, not Chosr.
Right, Recheka, it's distant, beyond you, but it's not Chosr, right? Like it says elsewhere in the Inyan of it talks about Shabbos. What was the world missing? So it says Bo Shabbos Bo Menucha. It was missing Menucha, peace. So Shabbos came. So my Elam Chosed. You see Chosed. So what do you learn from that? That yes, there's a state there. The world is missing something. I don't know if he means there. Yeah, Chosed for sure. It is missing. So Shabbos is filling a lack in existence. Para Aduma is not filling a lack in existence. Para Aduma is revealing a dimension of existence on its own, wouldn't even know about. But because he has Chachma, he has a glimpse into it. That's why he's trying to reach it. Very interface related here. Really gives us a whole picture of what a chukah is. You know, there's like L'mayla M'seichel. Seichel is trying to reach there, then there's how it brings it down. Very interessant. But I'm still wondering about the Etzem HaMechen. So Paraduma. And this is what he prefaces and says. This is Chukas HaTeira. This is the Chukah of Teira. Remember, he asked the question, what do you need this whole elaboration? He could have just said, V'yidaber Hashem al Moshe, and says, V'yikolech paradum, ma kol arichas zes chukas. Daber b'nei Yisrael, etc. So what's Akdama zes chukas? So now he explains. The chukah, hu shalamayla metam v'das. Chukah means a law, an edict, a dictate, that is higher than tam v'das, higher than intelligence. Super rational, super intelligent. Ve'ena kavana shi l'mayla metam v'das l'gamri. The intention here is not that it's completely beyond tam v'das. It's just that in our das, it's not in the world of human of the world's intelligence. It's
higher terrestrial knowledge.
The das in the world, intelligence in the world, is the knowledge in Seder Shtasus. The das zehu, like we said in what did he say the word is? Deya kanisa machasarta. Das zehu shamudl b'Seder. This das, however, l'mal tav chukah, is a das that's moved. It's removed from Seder Shtasus, but it's not completely. It's the core of Chochmah Mamish, literally the core of intelligence. The core course. If you're able to strip intelligence, conscious intelligence, you get to the core, which is connected to Chochmah Shtima. Okay, so that's the same level that. So it's not completely removed. So if you have das of Elam Machasarta, but this day is a higher day. And this is the meaning. Hashem spoke to Moshe. This is the mitzvah paraduma is this level of chukah that's higher than tam v'das that Shlomo was unable to attain or contain. She b'chinas das datzil because he is in the level of das datzil. V'hi b'chinas hadas shemamshich b'chinas chitzenius chachma bina. Yes, chitzenius chachma bina. I'll have to explain something here in a moment. So he's mamshir, the lower dimension of Chacham Bina, the outer dimension. That's only reflection alone. But I said Chak Mawanu because he is similar to the Etzem. So he said that but it's distant. And this is Zeichuk that's beyond Tam V'das. Why I say chukas hat teira? Because teira is chachma. So we say chukas hat teira is proof that it's also in the world of das. However, it's a das that's beyond existence. Teira is chachma. Chukas hat teira. The chukah of teira, meaning in the world of teira, it's chukah beyond the regular das. It's das, but it's higher than the order, the structure. And through Torah mitzvahs, your mamish bring down Atzmus HaChochmah, which is of course the Chiddush of Matan Torah. In other words, through Torah mitzvahs, you bring down even Chukas HaTorah below. That's an interesting final line. That just like, yeah, but no, but it's consistent. But you could, it's consistent. He doesn't say yet. Ultimately, you'll be able to also understand Paraduma.
Like when Mashiach comes now.
Yeah.
This line is not so consistent.
Okay, but here's the Chitzeni is Chachma. The thing I must qualify here, which was bothering me as I was reading it. Same thing. It's the same thing. It's not different. It's the same level.
It's the same level.
He's not distinguishing here. Yeah, but it means he's talking about Chochmah. It means das here, not as in distinguishing das from Chochmah. Talking about das kanisa, deya kanisa, Chochmah. What's bothering me, not what's bothering you, maybe that's just what you just said may answer the question. Till now we were learning, before this Maimer, that the Ovis would draw down Abba V'Ima, Chetzenis Abba V'Ima, Abba V'Ima Tatoin, which is Yisrael Saba Tfuna, which is Meichin as it applies to Midas, which is higher than Yisrael Zuta, Midas, even Gadlus HaMidas, based on Gadlus HaMeichin, mature emotions, and definitely higher than Yaakov. And then he introduced this Atzmus HaMeichen. That's Yichud Abba V'Elohim. If you remember how a student and a teacher become absorbed in each other completely, that was Matan Torah. He said that will be lost. Love will be the completion of that. Pnimius Abba, Pnimius Atik, Pnimius Bina, Pnimius Abba and Bina, Mina, Chachma and Bina will join. He said Bina adds the Hasaga, that it's internalized, and Chachma adds the truth, the resonating truth. Those are the 4 levels. And the Ovis did the lower 3, or the third. Means Yisros Abba Tfuna, the lower Abba V'Ima, and Matan Torah, and the Asher Love will be the higher Abba V'Ima. Then he spoke here a whole discussion, Medaber Chai Tzameach Temem, and he said Medaber is Seichel Be'etzem, not connected to Midas, as opposed to Chai. So I was thinking, okay, so Betzalel is Chai, Mechen Midas, like Yisrael Sabbat Tfuna. Shloimeh or Medaber is Seichel Be'etzem. He said clearly it's Etzem HaSeichel. He said it several times. Now he's coming back and saying, no, even in Atzilus itself, even Chochma of Atzilus is not Chochma of Shleima. I think that's the answer. Chochma of Atzilus is still not Paraduma. That's why Shleima was unable to reach it. So I started thinking, 1 second, so what level are we talking about here? Which is Etzem HaMeichen, is Shleima? But I think what you just said, you just reminded me correct. Shleima, Medaber, real Medaber of Atzilus is not Shleima either. Shleima is Chachma de Chesed or Chachma Tata, that's rooted in Chachma of Chesed, means Chachma within Chesed, so it's connected still into the world of emotions at the end of the day. But it's in Atzilus. So it's Medaber, I would say it's like a lower level of Medaber. He does say it's a level of Medaber, I believe here. Yeah. So Shleima is in Atzilus itself. You have Medaber, as he says, like of Seichel of Atzilus. So it's Letzedech Atzilus and Machasata. There's nothing missing. It almost sounds like in the 4th level there's 2 levels in Etzem HaMeichen. There's Meichen as it is in Atzilus, which is Shleima, and then there's Meichen as it connects with Chachmas Tima, which that is Recheika, that's beyond. So the truth is, Medaber Sheba Medaber sounds a little higher than Shleima Melech. Shleima Melech sounds more like an outer dimension of that. So Shleima is still the level of Chitzenius Chachma Bina, which is more like the Ovis. And the Etzem HaMeichen, that comes from Torah Mitzvah, so Matan Torah. I'm just qualifying because it's a little back and forth. It sounds there's somewhat of an additional dimension here. Because Shleima is also not Yisrael Sabbat Tfun. He's not speaking about Mamish. 1 second. He's not speaking Shleima as Chai. He's definitely not speaking as Chai. He's speaking as Medaber. So you have to say Medaber itself 2 levels. Am I making sense? Yeah. Okay, let's do the Kitzur, which we did yesterday, but let's do it again. That was done. The example above of what? Of the 4 levels of Demet Sameh Chai Medaber. We have the inanimate, the vegetation, plant dimension, the life dimension, Chai, and the Medaber, the intelligent dimension. Above, that's a Malchus, which is the source of creation. The words of Hashem, the word of Hashem is considered to be action. That's what Malchus receives from the outer dimension of Yisod. The Maisa is like a separate power, like he spoke later, writing. That's Daimon. The Dibur Dibur, as it receives from Tiferet, is like Tzemeach, that grows, that's radiates in Yetzirah, and we said that was like Dibur. Yeah. Okay, so I'm correct. Dibur, that's Dibur. Later also Dibur. That's why Dibur, when you concentrate, you could reach a deeper dimension. Etzem Nekudas HaMalchus, number 3, Habikasa says Parsa, the core Nekudah Malchus that pierces the curtain, Umeir B'Briya Zebchinis Chai, and radiates in B'Briya, that's the level of Chai. Or Malchus, Kameshi Batzil Zebchinis Medaber. And Malchus, the way it's not Tzil, that's the level of Medaber. Communicator. B'Zeu Abiyah Sheba Malchus. These are the 4 levels of Abiyah, Tzil B'Briya Tzil and Malchus. And the same thing is in the higher spheres, as he spoke about Chesed. Yedei hay betzal tzaraf eis is bechinas seichel shebebriya. Betzal is knowledge to combine the letters. That's seichel abriya, as we discussed. Chachma shleim is seichel atzilus, and the wisdom of shleim is the intelligence of atzilus. So b'malachim yetzim mishasim hamahavim hamishavim ma'berurim v'nechlom machuzeh bechinas tzemeach. In malachim yetzim mishasim, but that what they come as are created through our refinements below, and they are encompassed in malchus, like he said, chatzir, the behemoth. The pasuk, the full pasuk, actually you see it clear. Matzmiach chatzir lebehema. Then I think it's the Esav l'Sadam, right? B'aveda Sadam. Esav Aveda Sadam. What's the final words in the? Yeah. Kuf Beis. Okay. That's what I wanted. In other words, so it's like Lahetzi it is. Is that Kuf Beis? Capital Kuf Beis? Tzadik Gimel. Kudal. Okay. Good. Va'asher Mesharsav. Those that stand from that are perpetuating, or what do we say, sustained. Since they're makabel, they remain standing, not like the others that get consumed, like the behemoth rabbah that with the gulp swallows up the malachim. Yeah, and this is the level of Asius. Letter Shem B'chinas Kelim u'Behameir Aras HaSeichel Shemein HaEtzem Zeu B'chinas Atzilus. What's the Vizahu? Okay, and this is the Amshach of the transmission through letters that they are like containers, and them radiate the heart of the intelligence. That's Me'ein HaEtzem, like we said, the intelligence of Chachma, and Atzilus. That's the level of Atzilus. The Cyrus and the here is who I'm shachal b'chinas tzemeach.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
The Cyrus are the level of transmission of the level of tzemeach. What?
Where did Atzilus going? This is between the Atzilus?
That's the level of Atzilus. Esis. And Cyrus is the level of tzemeach. Kama Esis aksav, like the letters in writing. See here it says it's tzemeach. Before he says Daimim and Semeach. I think Ksav is more Daimim and Tiput. Okay.
The meaning of the letter.
Oh, like the Atzbois. He compared it to the fingers. I'm sorry. Yeah, the fingers. What did he say about the fingers? Yeah, yeah. So the fingers are like Ksav. Compare that to Tzemeach. So then what's Dibur? Okay, it goes back and forth. It's not 100% clear. Tzemeach, something is in the evidence. It's like the Ksav when you write something with your fingers. Okay. He doesn't spell it out here in the Kitzur. Inside it sounds like Dibur is a little higher than that.
Maybe it's ACS because the ink is made out of Tzemech. It's made out of...
Just like an ink.
No, I don't think so. No, it's the fingers. He says the fingers like the Saira. It's detached. Okay. He says befedish in the Panim. Because etzba, he says writing something is like a Saira. The fingers are not real containers to intelligence. They're like the Saira.
This is Isis. We've said before. Isis is more a container to the ayah, which is.
Read. He says this.
Writing it out of something.
That's different than the Isis. Isis before he said is the ayah double the Michad and Kere.
That's not now. We're talking now Cyrus. He's comparing it to Cyrus. Isis Aksavi compares to Cyrus, not to.
That's what I'm saying. It's strange because in the Krim,
it's not. No, he doesn't. No, read it. It's not correct. Here too he says Asius Shehem B'chinas Kalim. Read 3 lines in the Kitzur earlier. It also says Asius, but not Ksav. Matter of fact, he uses Machshav, if I recall.
Okay, so that's Isis Machshav.
Machshav or Dibur.
Yeah, that's Isis Machshav, it says.
Yeah. That's what the transmission for the need of Atzilus, purpose of Atzilus, is that Atzilus in every sphere. In other words, the Seichel, the Medaber in every sphere. And for the need and purpose of B'riyat Tzilus, it comes from the level of Dem Tzemei Chai. And with this we'll understand what it says, Das Kanisa B'chinas Atzilus B'chol Sfira. Deir Kanisa, you acquire Deir is the level of Atzilus in each sphere. That's the wisdom of Shlema. And that fulfills the lack, the void in Malchus, and causes it to be a full moon. And he did not contain Paradum, because that's already wisdom higher than Atzilus. And that's not a lack, because it's separate, it's not part of existence. But yet there's still a reflection in it, and that's why he tries to attain it. Amad would be good, attaining. Didn't attain it. And this is the meaning of chukah, that it's higher than Tam B'das. Okay, we'll stop here, finish the Maimer 37. We did pages 289 and 290, the end of chapter 148.